Update number 2 is that Ben Gagnon, the new CEO of Bitfarms, recently had another interview with Anthony Power from Power Mining Analysis and Bryce McNally from McNally Money. So the whole interview is like over an hour long. I'm sure not all of you have the time to go watch it. So if you don't want to watch the whole thing, then you're in luck, because I watched the whole thing and I made a summary. So I'm just going to quickly go through the summary, and then we can maybe have a discussion about it between me and Tristan. And then, so the update or the summary is that I mentioned earlier about the Riot takeover situation. There's no other big update that's in the short term other than that agreement where they agreed upon that one board member that they both wanted to add. So yeah, I'm going to skip the beginning part where I already talked about that. But Ben did mention that at any time Riot can submit another acquisition offer, and it would be entertained if the price is obviously if it's reasonable, right? So if you guys don't know, Riot had an acquisition offer initially, which was the thing that kickstarted this whole thing, where they offered $2.30 USD per share to acquire Bitfarms, and that was kind of universally pushed back upon by the Bitfarms management and shareholders, saying that that was way too low. Funny enough, the stock is still around that price right now, right? And my opinion at least has not changed. I still think that that's way too low. So Riot can at any time come back and submit another offer, but they would have to do much better than that in order to have a chance at acquiring Bitfarms, in my opinion. But for now, Riot has agreed to stay at 19.9% ownership of Bitfarms, which is the max they can go up to without triggering the poison pill provision. So that's kind of the situation with Riot for now. Now, a big part of the interview was around the acquisition of Stronghold. So that was another piece of news that we covered when it first broke, where Bitfarms is acquiring Stronghold, which is another smaller miner. And they have a couple of sites in Pennsylvania where Ben Gagnon was saying how he toured the sites, and this was a long time ago. This was like, I think he said he went there after the Miami conference, which was like 2 years ago. And then he toured the sites and he thought they was great. But he thought that the team, like kind of Stronghold, he thought that they were new and they probably didn't really know what they were doing. But they had some great assets. So that's kind of like one of the, that's one of the motivating factors as to why Bitfarms wanted to buy Stronghold, was because they had strong assets. Now, a series of unfortunate events happened against Stronghold, where the Luna collapse and the 2022 bear market really hit Stronghold really hard financially. And then you can see this on the balance sheet where they're not, they don't have the best balance sheet. But according to Ben, the core assets were still incredibly attractive. So that's why he decided to move forward. And since Ben Gagnon became CEO, he's been trying to diversify the revenue streams away from just Bitcoin mining. Obviously, they're still doing Bitcoin mining as their main business, but they're looking at opportunities to expand into power generation, i.e. selling like the power back to the grid, right? Because Stronghold owns power generation stations. So, that could be potentially a revenue stream, or HPC AI, which is all the hype these days, right? So Bitfarms is not totally close to HPC AI, but we'll talk about that a little bit more later. Bitfarms has decided that the best way to unlock Stronghold's value is to buy the entire company and not like trying to chop up individual pieces and work with the individual pieces. And as I said earlier, the energy trading with the grid, right? Selling power back to the grid is another potential great revenue stream with minimal CapEx that's needed. CapEx means capital expenditure, right? So they don't need to invest a lot of additional capital to get that going if they already own the Stronghold sites once they close that deal. So the two sites combined for Stronghold has an additional 648 megawatt hours of capacity that they can expand into. So this is in addition of whatever they already have. So I think it was like 300 something megawatt hours that they have there already between the two sites. But then they could expand a lot if they wanted to. So Bitfarms is working with consultants and advisors to ensure that the value is there for the Stronghold acquisition. And there were about 3 or 4 other companies that were trying to acquire Stronghold that Bitfarms had to outcompete, which they successfully was able to do. The deal is still scheduled to close in Q1 of 2025, and their plan is to eventually integrate Stronghold into Bitfarms. However, that's going to take time and it's not going to be immediate. And immediately after the acquisition, they're still going to run them as 2 separate companies. So the agreement, Bitfarms announced an agreement to host some of Bitfarms' miners at Stronghold sites. And this is just kind of like a way to speed up the value generation for the miners, because before they were trying to put them in the Paraguay site, but the Paraguay site is still constructing, like the construction is still underway. So, Bitfarms thought, hey, like if you have the space, let's put the miners at the Pennsylvania sites at Stronghold and get that going, as opposed to waiting till the Paraguay site is complete, which is scheduled to complete in December, but it's still a few months away. So Bitfarms decided to kind of leverage that time and leverage this deal to generate some extra income, which I think is really smart. And despite the Paraguay site taking a long time, Ben said that it's actually moving a lot faster than what he had expected. And such build-outs in Paraguay, like the Paraguay site is rather big comparatively. And if he said that if he tried to do that in the US and build a similar sized site, it would take more than twice as long. So a build-out of what Bitfarms is doing in Paraguay would take 18 months if it was in the US, so like 1.5 years essentially. But Bitfarms is expecting the whole timeline for the Paraguay site to be half as long. So again, I think they started this earlier in the year, and they're expecting to wrap up before the end of the year on that site. So instead of backfilling Ben's former role as chief mining officer, which was what he was before he became CEO, Bitfarms has decided to implement some management changes to kind of delineate the roles better. So instead of having people who are jack of all trades, they separated it into infrastructure and miners. And the global mining officer, mining operations officer, is responsible for handling issues with the miners themselves. And the infrastructure officer will manage everything that has to do with kind of the sites and the buildings and the electricity that goes into the miners and stuff like that. So regarding HPC, Bitfarms is looking at HPC opportunities, but that is fundamentally a different business than Bitcoin mining. And they're trying to balance the return on invested capital versus between Bitcoin mining and HPC, right? Because it's not always interchangeable between the two. So he says that he does have Ben says that he does have concerns around HPC, just because it is a competitive space and it's hard to find a competitive advantage because you're actually trying to compete with people with companies like Google and Microsoft. So it's not entirely clear what unique competitive advantage that Bitfarms can offer if they were to get into HPC. But this is, again, Bitfarms is not completely close to this idea. It'll just have to, Ben says that he's looking at things as they come. And one potential idea is that they might launch a pilot project with just 1 megawatt hour, very small, and see if it makes sense. That's on the HPC side. Bitfarms is still on track to hit 21 exahash by the end of the year. So that's good news. September update will be out on October 1st, right? I appreciate how they're always one of the first, if not the first, Bitcoin miners to publish their monthly updates. So we will have more clarity, not just on how many Bitcoin they mine, but on schedules and stuff to see like what hash rate they're operating at, and like just to double confirm that everything is on schedule. And yeah, before the end of the year, Bitfarms will also provide more insights on what their 2025 hash rate target is. So I think they said 21 exahash by the end of this year and 35 exahash sometime in 2025, but they didn't say specifically, what quarter or what time in 2025 they'll hit 35 exahash. So that was kind of a point of contention that the guys that were interviewing McNally Money and Anthony Power were trying to ask Ben, and Ben said, just wait. Before the end of the year, we'll publish an update with more specific targets. So looking forward to that. And yeah, Bitfarms has always been strategic when it comes to buying miners. So it's not always the most capital efficient idea to buy the latest and greatest miners because, yes, they might be the most efficient and they might have the most hash rate. But they tend to also be the most expensive, right? So Bitfarms is always trying to look for deals and trying to optimize return on capital, which means that oftentimes they're buying like kind of the second generation, like the generation past of miners, and relying on those as the main kind of workhorses of the fleet. So that's kind of like another point of what makes Bitfarms unique is that or what makes, I guess, Ben Gagnon unique, because he has a lot of experience in this field, and he's been pretty successful at optimizing capital, if I do say so myself. But essentially, that was the whole interview. Now, I just read through the summary. I know the summary was kind of long just by itself, but the interview if you actually try to watch the whole interview is going to take even longer. So I hope that summary was helpful.